Tonight, when you turn off the lights and lie in bed, you might feel a small flutter of anxiety. Your phone sits dark on the nightstand. Tomorrow looms with deadlines, expectations, people who need something from you. But the real fear that kept your ancestors awake at night was far stranger than anything you've ever felt. For 99% of human history, darkness meant something specific. It meant death was close. It meant a saber-toothed cat could be circling your camp right now. It meant the tribe's fire was the only thing standing between your family and the void. When your ancestor lay down to sleep in that darkness, fear wasn't an emotion they chose to feel. It was a biological command. Stay alert, stay ready, stay alive. But you don't actually fear the dark anymore. Not really. You've traded that ancient terror for something subtly different. You fear judgment. You fear irrelevance. You fear missing out. These are not the fears of prey animals watching the tree line. These are the fears of social creatures obsessed with their standing in the group. And the shocking part is this. Your brain hasn't changed in 200,000 years. You are still wired for threats that no longer exist, and you are blind to threats that do. Psychologist Paul Ekman, who spent decades studying human fear across cultures, discovered something remarkable. When he showed photographs of fearful faces to people in remote tribes who had never seen movies or magazines, they recognized that fear instantly. The same facial expression, the same biological response. Fear, it turns out, is written into your nervous system before you ever have a single thought about what you're supposed to be afraid of. But here's where it gets interesting. Ancient humans weren't afraid of the things you think they were. They didn't spend their nights trembling at the thought of being alone. Humans are profoundly social creatures, but they lived in tight communities of 30 to 150 people. Everyone knew everyone. The concept of loneliness as your ancestors understood, it was almost impossible. You couldn't be alone if you wanted to be. Your tribe was your survival. Betrayal by the group? Yes. Abandonment by the group? Absolutely. But loneliness? That's a modern invention. What ancient humans actually feared was visceral and immediate. They feared the predator. They feared starvation. They feared disease. They feared social exclusion within their tight community because social exclusion meant death. If the tribe decided you were a liability, you were cast out. And cast out, in a world with lions and hyenas and no grocery stores, you didn't last long. But here's the thing that changes everything. Your ancestors were not afraid of predators constantly. For most of human history, apex predators were actually pretty rare where humans lived. Yes, in Africa, there were lions. In Asia, there were tigers. But most human populations managed to avoid them most of the time. Fear of predators was real, but it was also episodic. It came and went. It was triggered by genuine threats in the environment. When you weren't being hunted, your nervous system could relax. Anthropologist Mary Stiner studied the relationship between human communities and large carnivores over thousands of years. What she found was that humans developed sophisticated strategies to avoid predator encounters. They hunted at certain times of day. They moved camps strategically. They used fire and noise as deterrents. In other words, they solved the problem. The fear response persists in you today, but your ancestors found ways to manage it, to make it useful rather than crippling. Starvation was the constant hum beneath all ancient fear. Food was unpredictable. A drought could wipe out the plant foods you depended on. Game animals could disappear for a season. Your ancestors' bodies and brains evolved under conditions where you genuinely never knew where your next meal would come from. This trained you to be hyper-alert to opportunity. It trained you to eat when food was available, even when you weren't hungry. It trained you to prefer calorie-dense foods above all else because the calories might disappear tomorrow. And this is where a profound tragedy occurs in the modern world. Your ancient fear of starvation, the biological alarm system designed to keep you eating when food is scarce, is now firing constantly in an environment where food is abundant. You're surrounded by thousands of calories, and your nervous system is still running a program that says, "Eat now, because this might be the last meal for days." This isn't laziness. This isn't a personal failing. You're caught in a mismatch between your ancient biology and your modern environment. But starvation, as a real threat, is only part of what your ancestors feared. Disease was perhaps the most omnipresent terror of all. Infection from a wound could kill you in days. Parasites could drain your strength until you couldn't hunt or gather. Illness could sweep through your community and take half the people, and you had no way to know what caused it or how to stop it. You had no germ theory, you had no antibiotics, you had rituals and shamans and spiritual explanations, but you had no actual control. This created a specific kind of psychological reality. Your ancestors developed a fear of contamination, a disgust response that kept them away from obviously dangerous things. Rotten meat, feces, corpses. The disgust you feel when you see something moldy or smell something foul is not a learned preference. It's a biological protection system evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. It kept you alive. It kept your tribe alive. It still does, most of the time. Except your modern world has weaponized that ancient fear. You see a news story about a virus and your contamination fear, which was designed to help you avoid actual rotting meat and diseased water, goes haywire. You worry about microplastics in your blood. You fear bacteria on your phone. You sanitize things obsessively. Your ancient defense system, suddenly triggered by invisible threats presented through a screen, becomes anxiety instead of protection. Then there was the fear that might have been most powerful of all, the fear of death itself. But not the death of aging or natural decline. Your ancestors' fear of death was different. It was the fear of being seen, the fear of being marked, the fear of being selected. You see, humans are predators too. And unlike lions or hyenas, human predators hunt humans. Warfare, raiding, violence between groups is visible in archaeological records going back at least 10,000 years and probably much further. Your ancestors lived under the threat of rival groups. They lived under the threat of slave-taking raids. They lived under the threat of being killed not by an animal, but by another person who looked like them, who spoke a similar language, who wanted what they had. This created in your brain a different kind of fear response. A fear of visibility, a fear of standing out, a fear of being perceived as weak or different or a liability to the group. Because if the neighboring tribe raided your village and your group was winnowing who to take and who to leave behind, you wanted to be seen as useful. You wanted to belong. You did not want to be marked as expendable. Psychologist Roy Baumeister has written extensively about the human fear of social exclusion and rejection, and he argues that it's one of the most powerful fears your species possesses. People will endure physical pain to avoid social rejection. They will compromise their values. They will reshape themselves entirely to fit in with the group. And this fear, which was once about survival, persists in your modern life in the form of anxiety about what others think of you. You check how many likes you got on a photo. You feel a spike of panic when you say something awkward in a meeting and everyone goes quiet. You worry obsessively about the joke that didn't land. You wonder if people talked about you after you left the room. These feelings are not irrational. They are not personal weakness. They are the echo of an ancient fear so powerful that it shaped your entire neurology. They are the fear of being marked as unsuitable for the group. But here's what you need to understand. Most of those ancient fears, the ones your ancestors lived with constantly, were actually more solvable than the fears you carry now. Your ancestors feared predators, so they developed weapons and tactics and community size that made predation rare. Your ancestors feared starvation, so they developed agriculture and food storage and trade networks. Your brain still carries ancient instincts into a modern world, but awareness.